that feels like a perfect kickoff to meeting with you again on this lovely Tuesday. Hello, happy noon.
All right, so we'll go ahead and kick it off. Welcome to Profit and Love. I am Executive Coach Dorian Cunion, owner of Your Path Coaching and Consulting.
My name is Madeline McMahon. I am a fractional marketing strategist, and I often work with small business teams like craft breweries to help identify a marketing strategy around current objectives and a budget. Get things started. So, this
All
week
right.
we are talking about measuring what matters. And I think that that falls right in line with some of the things that I like to look at, measuring current objectives and things where they are. So, why this topic? Tell me what matters to you.
The topic for today is all about measuring. I frequently find that they have a couple of goals, but they don't necessarily love the goals that they have, and that the process of really sitting down, determining what are those true kind of disregard, not pay a whole lot of attention to everything else, really can give them the confidence to move fast and to really do the things to accelerate the growth within their business.
Excellent. And do you typically start talking about goals when you connect with your clients, or at what point in the process do you start talking about measurements and what should be measured?
Yeah, very early in the process, we talk about financial goals. And whenever I'm talking to a small business owner, I really try to get them the separate objectives. We all have mortgages. Some people have college funds they got to pay for, travel. So really defining like how much money do you actually want going into your pocket? And then separately, how much money do you want going into your business? Because if you have big dreams of expansion, owning a property, taking over a region, you're going to need some capital to do that, and really try to make sure that there's clarity as far as how much money do we need to generate for the business, and then how much money do you actually want to put into your pocket.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction too, talking about personal goals versus business goals and reflecting on how those things can overlap when you're a solopreneur or when you're managing a team. So before we dive in a little bit deeper, what are some of your personal goals, Dorian? What's something that really motivates you personally?
Well, I have to say that I've been very fortunate over the course of my life to be able to do some travel. So, in addition to the goals that I think everybody has as far as being able to like kind of take care of their home and take care of their family, there's some countries that I haven't traveled to yet, and I'd really like to continue to grow my business just to be able to fuel my travel. Some people wait till they retire. I'm like, no, I want to do it now where my knees are still working and I can go around and see stuff. And I love the experiences of going to see foreign countries because I always come back with something new that I can apply in my business and be better at what I do. How about
Very
you?
cool. Yeah. What I've realized in owning my own business is my goal is to have the freedom to work with the people that I really enjoy being around and not just chasing contracts or opportunities, but truly having the freedom to work with the people that I want to and to be in the room that serves me where I am right now. I've mentioned earlier that I work a little bit in craft beer, and something I've found over the years is that often brewery owners that were very passionate about their product were not necessarily equipped to be an entire C-suite. I often say we can't be good at everything. And so you'll find individuals that have successfully started a business maybe don't have the freedom to choose how they spend their day. They're forced to be every hat and every part of the building. And so one of my goals I have for myself is not only to those standard things and having a life and being able to pay my bills, but truly the freedom to select which opportunities I spend the most time in. I think that that's a luxury that we all maybe strive towards.
No, I think that's awesome because, I know that when you go into business for yourself, generally people want to make money, they want to have some freedom, and they want to have fun. If you didn't want those things, you just kind of stay in corporate. Really getting clarity as far as what's that vision of the lifestyle that they want, I think is super important. During some of the earlier workshops that we've done, we talked about vision, and I think it's really important that you have a clear vision as far as, what's the impact that you want to make in your business? What's the quality of life that you want to have? What's the impact you want to make for your employees and then your customers? And then with that information, that sets you up for setting goals. So that really leans into what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, so where do we get started with
So,
that?
Madeline, I'd like to do a little bit of a role play with you today. So last week we had Dr. Rudy on, and was talking about trust, and I felt like that was just super helpful. Today, I'd like to, but I don't want to do it for your business. I know that you work with a lot of people in the beer industry. I know you understand that business owner really well. Would you mind role playing as if you were the owner of a beer company, and let's just kind of set some really good goals?
Yeah, I love that idea. That sounds like a really fun exercise. Let's start.
All righty. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. So the page that around virtual consulting. A lot of times when I'm just starting off with a business owner, they'll kind of have some questions around like what my services are. So if you're interested, you can kind of just kind of go through this and kind of see what is efficiency. But that's not the topic of today. The topic of today is the business model canvas. So here is a free business model canvas that you can download and use so that you can, just try to get all your ideas around growing your business onto one document, so that you can really come up with a really good plan for growing your business. So starting off, when I'm working with small business owners, we always initially talk that makes your business special and unique. And we don't have all day, so I don't want to go super broad. Can you think about like one type of project or event that someone within the beer industry would do that we could kind of talk about within this model to kind of help people understand how to use this?
Yeah, I can come up with something. It's typically my experience that brewery owners are looking to get individuals to come into the building. They want those on-premise sales. So I find that an activation makes a big difference in that. Something like maybe hosting a trivia night, for example. Would that work for
Okay,
this?
that would work perfectly. And I know a little bit about trivia nights. When I lived in Maryland, me and my wife would go out to trivia nights probably 3 to 4 times a month. So I think I have an idea of what are some things that can get people in the room.
Excellent. Okay, so what do we
Okay.
do next?
So when you think about an event like a trivia night, what's the value that you're providing for the customer?
I find there's a lot of value in something to do, not just a reason to get out of the house, but an actual activity, something that engages your mind or engages your friend group while you're at the location that you visit.
I absolutely love that. So if I'm bored and I like beer and I want to get together with my friends, then a trivia night might be the perfect thing that we can get together, go out and have a good time at.
Right? Sounds like a good plan.
So when you think about what a beer owner would need to do to make sure that they have a successful.
Ooh, wow. Well, it would be really important to have a host, right? We definitely need someone who's going to organize the questions. And then it would also be important to have buy-in from the individuals working the shift. So
Mm.
not just knowing that there's trivia on premise, but having all of the individuals that work within the brewery encouraging people to come in for that trivia night, or making sure they know that that event is coming up. So it would be really important to have, again, the person that is presenting the event as the host, and then also those individual components of inviting people to attend the night itself.
Okay, so I love that. So we need a host, we need the staff on board, we need a marketing plan. I
Mm.
think that's good for us getting started. Are there any resources that you think that a business owner would need in order to do a trivia night?
I think it is really impactful if you can partner with a trivia host that has their own following, someone that people
Mm.
really enjoy going to see them personally. So maybe they're more likely to visit my brewery because I have that host in particular. So I think that that's a big component. Also, my brewery, we were members of local
Mm.
organizations. So I think that it would be really resourceful if I were to invite those groups to come because we already support each other. So knowing that I could get a couple of butts in seats even before advertising it, that would be really helpful. A good host and leaning into my community that already supports me.
I absolutely love that. One of the things I was at a workshop years ago and they talked about using other people's people. And it was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. It's like, who are the people that you know that know other people? And if you can use other people's people, it's a good way of filling a room. Now, when you think about that specific trivia night, who do you think would be like super excited to like show up?
Hmm. Well, I luck out with trivia because I think there's a couple of categories. I think that there are trivia nerds, respectfully, right? People that are motivated just by trivia and gamifying and maybe winning something with that. I think that that appeals to friends that are looking for a reason to get out of the house but don't want to plan something to do per se, right? It's a nice a trigger point to get you out, but you don't have to necessarily do any of the work to enjoy it. And then truly neighboring people. We're nestled into a really nice community, so I can see local individuals just appreciating how close there is something to do to where they live and where they are spending their day organically.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we have the trivia nerds, we have friends that might not necessarily live near the restaurant, but they love the restaurant or the bar, so they're willing to come out and drive in. I would think that beer enthusiasts, we'd also add, and then neighbors, so people that are in the community that would maybe, see about it on Facebook or hear about it just from people and show up. Speaking of channels, what are some ways that you would get the word out about this event?
Well, I am a big fan of organic social media efforts, which is an opportunity to pay with your time, right? So I'd probably make a Facebook event for it. That way I can connect with all of my current followers and letting them know that I have this trivia event coming up. Social media platforms are also great for sharing upcoming events for individuals nearby. So that Facebook event is potentially a way that I can capture some of my neighboring audience. I think I'm also going to do an Eventbrite. I found that Eventbrite is a really good local resource in Virginia. A lot of local organizations are putting their events into that, and Eventbrite sends out emails, and there are different notifications that I might receive about events if I do the Eventbrite route. And then I am also thinking of the actual brick and mortar as a channel, right? I'm going to make some posters. I think I'm going to put a poster up at the front door that
Hmm.
lets people know they should come back. And maybe have some tabletops throughout the restaurant as well, so that people have that notification there's an event they should come back for if they've come to see us before we start hosting trivia.
I love what you've laid out here because this is a low cost method that we're getting people to think about the brewery. We're giving them a reason to come by. Ultimately, what would be the goal in having this event? What are we looking to do?
But my first goal would be getting people in the door. That's always a bonus. I think the reason to have trivia, though, would really be to get people to stay for longer, not just stop by and see me, not just stop by and see my staff that they know, but it is a reason to keep people hanging out. While hopefully still spending money. I don't necessarily want an activation that pulls people into a space and they're not continuing to order more food or drinks. So something I might also need to think about is a food or drink special that also incentivizes people ordering another round while they're there. But I think other than just that foot traffic, the primary goal would be getting people to stay for longer ticket times.
Now, with the breweries that you work with, do most of them rely on just transactions, or are there any other things like loyalty clubs or memberships that they have?
There are lots of different ways that you can connect with your guest. There are loyalty clubs like mug clubs, and there is a social platform for craft beer called Untapped, which also kind of gamifies it. Breweries can lean into leveraging that software. I also find that merchandise is a really great conversation starter. I'm in an area where I see some tourists, and I find that people that are coming through town that maybe won't become my regular patrons can be a brand ambassador for me, and that they're wearing my brewery shirt, even in their own hometown.
So I love that because that's another marketing tool to help raise awareness around the brand. So just pausing for a minute and just around, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. We've defined ideas on how to market it. We've determined who we want to market it to. We have some ideas as far as key partnerships and activities. I think we're at a point now that we can start to set some goals so we can measure this event. From your experience, like how many customers would we need to have come to the event to make something like this worthwhile doing?
Well, I think that depends, because I imagine that a really good host for a trivia night, one that brings a crowd and an audience, is probably one that's a little bit more expensive. So I need to think about what I'm investing in the event to get people in the
Mm.
door. So maybe it's not just considering the space and the time of day, it's also considering the cost of having that host. I also have found that sometimes a trivia person won't come just one time. So I may need to purchase a package of
Mm.
trivia nights from this company to know that they'll be able to come in. So I would need to consider that cost. But you've mentioned a lot of like relationships. And so thinking about my vendors and my resources, I'm wondering if there's a way to maybe partner with one of my vendors and have them co-host a trivia night for me that could maybe offset some of that cost. But ultimately, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to know how much it costs to have the host there, and then consider margins for a food special if I were to offer it. So I have chips and salsa, and maybe what I do is I have $1 chips and salsa during trivia as a way, again, to get people to stay for one more round, a way to get people in. I'd need to consider the cost of that and the difference in those margins from any revenue that I generate. Um, does that help answer the question?
It helps it perfectly. So I love the fact that each business is different. So what would work for a small startup is going to be different from into this saying, hey, we need to understand what are the different costs. You have the cost of the host. You have the cost of goods. You
Mhm.
have the cost of labor, and really taking the time to calculate, and then what it fixed, and then also the costs that are variable, that allows you to then start to think about, well, if it's going to cost me X amount of money for this to be worthwhile, then I need to have Y amount of revenue. So I love how you framed that up. What are some other things that would need to be considered as far as maybe the social media and what
Yeah,
targets someone
I'm
would want to say do frequency?
I'm glad you brought up cost of labor because I think to really celebrate and capitalize on hosting the event, it would be important to capture some content, So maybe I need to know I have a dedicated social media manager working during trivia, and their objective is to collect content that will help us advertise future events. Or maybe there's a
Mm,
component of it where we go live during the event. And that the idea would be that our audience is getting social proof of a successful event in real time. And maybe they don't get in their cars and drive over that day, but maybe they do prioritize coming to our next trivia night because they have this evidence of what's happening. I can also see too, say I do have a sequence of these events. I decide I'm going to do trivia for all of April. Maybe after the first event, I see what the metrics are. If I was able to generate a profit off of this first trivia event and I was not at maximum capacity, is this an opportunity to reinvest some of that into a paid ad that
mm.
advertises that this trivia night is coming up on social? Or is this an opportunity to keep it organic and just intentionally schedule collaborative content between us and the host? Or again, maybe if I do find a sponsor, the opportunity with social media could be collaborating on a post with our co-sponsor. So I'm reaching not only my normal audience, not only my events opportunity audience, but I'm also able to take advantage of the audience of my co-sponsor or of the vendor that I'm working with. So I could see going either direction, kind of based on how it goes with those first couple of engagements. Do I reinvest money in a paid social ad that helps me get closer to that maximum occupancy in my building? Or am I able to see more people come in simply by doing collaborative posts on social media platforms?
So what I love about what you just shared is that we have customer segments. So as we're thinking about, okay, we have this initial program that we're doing, how do we grow this? How do we scale this? Then we can start thinking about, okay, we want to do some ads that are specifically targeted to people that are in the neighborhood. Maybe we want to do some ads directed towards people that love trivia, or maybe even some ads
Mm.
that are specifically around friendship and community and spending time together. But by taking the time up front to kind of fill out this business canvas, it provides really that blueprint for making all your future decisions.
You know what we haven't talked about though, that I just realized, and we're talking about measuring things. I haven't talked about how I'm going to measure the customer experience. Okay, so I do this trivia night. I'm looking at my profit and loss statement,
Mm,
but am I surveying my employees to see that did they have good experiences with the guests that came in? Did they see the tips they were hoping to see? Did they have conversations with people that are going to come back and be patrons again? And then also taking the time to survey my audience. And that could look a couple of different ways, but am I taking the time to ask individuals that came out for that trivia night, is this trivia that you were interested in? Would you like to
yeah.
see other trivia topics? Or would you prefer this be on a different time of day or a different part of the day? So I think that that is a commonly missed opportunity in some of our craft industries, is not only remembering to measure, not only remembering to review those analytics, but asking for feedback from not only the guest experience, but from your employees' experience as well. And how do you measure that and integrate that into your return on investment?
I love that because it kind of goes back to, the balance scorecard and some of the things that we were talking about initially, as far as you want to have a financial goal. So we want to generate this much revenue. We want to have a process goal, which may be around like what we're doing as far as social media content and the amount of like videos and posts that we're making. We want to make sure that we have a customer goal as far as how many customers coming in and how much money are they spending. I hadn't thought about it until you said it, but having that people goal, like having a goal as far as how much tip money are we bringing in? Because what I know is that if the people that are working within the brewery, if they're making a lot of money off of tips, I'm out. So you're going to have a lot more positive energy than if you have them working really, really hard, but not feeling like they're getting a return on their effort.
Mm. Yeah. And that also, that reminds me too, if we challenge ourselves to really think about who our potential partners are, some are going to be, I think, more obvious than others, but I wouldn't have thought about my point of sale as necessarily being one of those potential collaborations, but that is where I'm pulling the data from. Is there an opportunity to have a more intentional conversation with my point of sale salesperson? You know, whether I'm using Toast or one of these other platforms, am I fully taking advantage of all the information I could be getting while a customer is there on premise? Am I truly diving into the details that are available to me in a way that I can make a more intentional decision about future events? So I think that this is your sign. If you're paying any of your vendors, it's definitely an opportunity to
Yeah.
go through and make sure that you're leveraging the resources that are available. And remember that your vendors are constantly evolving and selling things too. So just because they have a new tool or resource doesn't mean they always think to tell their existing customers. So it's good to really survey the entire landscape. Is there, from your point of sale to even the person doing your landscaping, like where are the opportunities to collaborate in a way that everyone wins from those conversations? So yeah, it's interesting what you think of casually talking about these things when measuring and metrics always feels so inherent in what I do. Even now, I'm thinking of other places I could have made a phone call that I hadn't thought of yet. So this is great.
And that's what I love about the business canvas because you get a bunch of things on paper and it's on one spot. So then you start, thinking about it. And what you just said as far as your POS system, you get an email, they say they have a new feature. You're thinking, I don't have time to dig into this and understand it. But as you're thinking about a project like this and like a bundling deal, it's like, how do we make it fat? How do we make the service faster so that, we can provide better service? Well, maybe if we set up a special key that gives 5% off or 20 items, you are improving the experience for your employees, which is going to improve the experience for your customers. So I love that this can help with idea generation because we make the best decisions when we start off with a lot of ideas and then narrow down on the ones that are most essential for us to execute.
Well, and then measuring it, not just narrowing down, not just implementing, intentionally reflecting on that cause and effect. Is this what we expected was going to happen? If not, why? And could we scale that if we wanted to? Was this just, some fun blimp, or is this something that we can recreate and scale? So having the vision, like we've talked about, having the framework, all of that is so important because you don't want to get to this step where it's time to measure and you don't know exactly what it is you're looking for, or you don't know what questions to ask. And I think it's just as important to know how to measure your employees experience as it can be to measure your customer experience. User experience is a really big part of sales.
Yeah. So I was consulting a restaurant company one time, and we actually put together a scoreboard that was in the back. And the scoreboard like kept track of, how many customers came in, how much did they spend, able to upsell. And it was huge as far as helping the employees understand what was important and what they needed to focus on. So, kind of thinking about like that concept, what are some fun ways that we could like communicate to the employees? Like, what are the goals that we have? And then any ideas on any celebrations we could do if we actually achieve some of the audacious goals that we're setting?
I love that. Well, we mentioned before, I love a good favorites list. I love taking the time to find out how my employees like to be celebrated so that I can intentionally celebrate in that way. But I have found that in restaurant environments and in brewery environments, in larger teams, gamifying things can be very fun. There are some people who are inherently competitive. There are some people that learn in different ways. So I really like weekly or monthly contests, and they can be motivated by different things. Let's say we have a merchandise item that we only have a few left and we just want to clear it out so we've got space for something new. Let's gamify that. The person who sells the most of this gets X incentive. Or we can have a collective group goal. If we all sell X number of t-shirts, or if we are able to get rid of all the packaged beer in this week, then there will be an employee outing, and maybe again an opportunity for partnering with some other local businesses. I'm a big fan of bartering. I really like trading, especially when it comes to those bigger teams. So if you've got another business that makes a food in a style that you don't, or an activity or something like that, is there an opportunity where you can swap those incentives for your employees in a trade? I've seen that happen a lot in food, where you trade back a house and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
having a structure where you can gamify it, where your rock stars can raise their hands and say, I like this type of encouragement and this type of competition. And then some of the more collective group things where they see the value in the community of it, in that everyone wins when the business wins. So I think there's a couple of different ways you can implement that, but it would be really beneficial to understand how your people like to be celebrated before you offer that incentive. I think we're all familiar with now, pizza parties aren't going to cut it, right? That's the ongoing joke. You can't buy people pizza. But actually, if you run a taco shop, you might find that your team wants some pizza. So if you have these
Yeah.
conversations, and sometimes it's not literally the pizza, it's sitting down to lunch together, right? Is the work appreciation language that your team wants one-on-one time with you? Do they want to sit down to a meal? Do they need a high five? Taking the time to investigate those, you can not only measure the results of the business, but then experience those in the culture, because you're rewarding people how they like to be appreciated.
I love what you're saying there, because it just reinforces the importance of trust and investing that time
Yes.
to really understand the people that you're working with. I can remember back when early in my career, I was working in stores, and my employees and I, to be honest, we would trade food with Wendy's. So there's only so much 7-Eleven food you can eat.
Right?
So the people from Wendy's, they would come over and they'd say, "Hey, can we get some hot dogs?" We'd say, "Can we get some hamburgers?" And we would horse trade. And when I think about what you're saying as far as understanding what's going to be valuable to your employees and paying attention to their behaviors and giving them the things that they enjoy, I mean, it hits on so many levels, because you're rewarding them, but you're rewarding them in a way that really resonates and shows that you care about them, which I think is special.
And that can be a challenge, because you can have 10 different team members with 10 different preferences, and so managing that is its own effort. But taking the time to actually reflect on it, to measure those different components, I think serves any leader. And it's always good to be able to fall back on that. We're not going to be perfect in recognition every time, but knowing that we've always got that way to recalibrate, to truly connect with the human that we're working with, I think that makes a really positive difference. Now, I can see, though, doing this chart and working through this exercise and feeling a little lost in the numbers. So, what do you recommend to someone who has started measuring but doesn't like what the measurement says yet? How do you keep going? How do you measure even when the numbers don't look the way you want them to?
Yeah, so, one thing that I truly believe is that you have to identify what are the wildly important metrics. So,
Mm.
going through all of this, at the end of the day, um, in business to try to make some money. So we want to make sure that we have clarity of the number one metric is the profit of the business. But with that said, we need to pay attention to what are some of those lead metrics that we have confidence that if we hit these at a high level, that we're going to have success. So based off of listening to you, I think the food margin is one of those things. It's like, it does us no good to sell 1,000 items at 2% margin. Like, we're not going to make any
Mm.
money that way. But if we can set a goal as far as we want to have this margin rate off of our food, we want to have this rate as far as our labor expenses, then we can have line of sight that, okay, if we can hit those two metrics, And if we can have the sales target, then we know that we're going to make some money.
So when it comes to business coaching, if I am at a point where I do need some help, or I'm crunching the numbers and I don't like what they see, like what is a good conversation starter in how a coach could help? I mean, you can't control my margins. You can't
Yeah.
control what my food cost is, but what could collaborating with a coach or an outside mind do to help me measure differently? Or what can you help me better see what an outsider could see that I don't see in the moment?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of times when you're running a business, you're so much into the details that you don't separate and look at the world around you. So a couple
Mm.
years ago, I was working with the restaurant owner of a Jamaican restaurant, and she was selling oxtails, and she was just like set that the price that she was selling oxtails was like the price that she had to sell. And, I helped her kind of look at how much time are you spending on this? How much demand, how much of a strain is it putting on your operations? And ultimately helped her come to the conclusion that her competitors were charging more, she could charge more,
Mm.
and that it would actually do a lot to help the business. So I think when you bring in an outsider that is not stuck in the weeds, that's not emotionally tied to this is the way that we've always done things, they can ask you questions to help you pause and say, is there a different way? And if there is a
Now,
different way, is there a better way?
and we also talk about like sharing resources and things like that. And I think we've mentioned SCORE and some other organizations before. So for our business owners that are watching this live or watching this later, because we do record this and share this on the Your Path Coaching YouTube page, if you are not in a place where you could invest yet in a coach, what other local resources, like what could I Google today if I was looking for an ally, or a better starting direction? What comes to mind to me is your local economic development, but I'm curious on, and I know you've got some resources on your website, so maybe it's that. What is a first step for someone who maybe isn't ready to make the investment in a coach yet, from some of the conversations that we've had?
Yeah, there are a lot of really great free resources that are out there. You mentioned SCORE. I always encourage people check out SCORE. They have workshops. Some of them are free. Some of them like charge, maybe up to $30. But when you think about the value that you get from that, where you're actually able to talk to somebody that's an expert, it's very low hanging fruit that can help you get some of the information you need to be successful. In
And do you
addition,
think, okay, sorry,
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry. I would just throw out that Verizon Small Business has this excellent online series where there's all types of workbooks that you can download. There's videos that will walk you through programs. And um, personally, I've gotten a lot of value off of just going through those videos as a refresher. Sometimes I learn something new, but they provide you with some of those workbooks that you can just take and implement and kind of do it yourself.
So, looking at the business scorecard and looking at the business canvas, what do I do with these forms after I fill them out? Am I just feeling inspired and I know where to go from there? Or what happens after I fill out these worksheets?
So, when I work with clients, and I'll just kind of throw up my website again just to kind of help walk people through the visual. So, one of the first things that we do is we sit and we look at the business scorecard and we start to identify, what are those financial goals that we care about? What are some of those customer goals? What are those process goals? And what are the people goals? So that's all about you and your business. The next thing that I encourage business owners to do is to do a SWOT analysis, which is still looking at yourself, but then also looking at the macro environment, identifying what are some opportunities that you could take advantage of that you're not, what are some threats that could impact your profitability that you need to take in consideration. And then once we have those two things, I challenge people to really like sit down and let's work on that business canvas. Let's try to clarify, what are the costs that we know that we have? What is the revenue that we want to have? And then use that to build a plan. So regardless if you're doing it yourself or you're working with a coach, these are three universal tools that I would advise all small business owners to use. And where I really have gotten feedback that it's helpful working with a coach is you have somebody to help hold you accountable. You have somebody that's a thought partner. And if you have the right coach, they have some experience working with some other businesses that can give you some new perspectives that can help you grow your business.
Mm. So is this something at what stage in my business are these worksheets most helpful? I mean, could these also apply to a startup, or do I need to have been in business for 2 to 5 years before I can start filling these out?
I am one of those people early in, my career, in addition to working for 7-Eleven, I was a soccer coach. And one of the things, and I never played soccer as a kid, I was a football
Oh, no
guy.
way. That's
But
funny.
what I learned from coaching soccer is that you don't become a great soccer player by just walking on the field at 18 years old and just kicking a ball. You start off, working on small skills, little dribbling skills, little passing skills, and the same thing is in business. When you're starting off, you want to do all the things that you're going to be doing when you're a mature business. You might not be able to do it as fast. You might not be able to do it as well. But if you practice the way that you want to perform later on, you're going to be building those skills, building that experience so that by the time you're 3 or 4 years into running a business, you understand financials, you understand goal setting, you understand strategy, and you're going to be able to move so much faster.
So would you recommend someone fill out these worksheets one time and that's what they have forever? Or should they look at these once a month, once a year? How often should business owners revisit these resources?
So at a minimum, I would recommend revisiting these once a year. If you're in an industry that's very dynamic, that's changing more frequently, you might want to do it every 6 months. As
Mm,
far as the goals and the targets that I help business owners set up on the scorecard, we tend to convert those into a monthly numbers, and then we track them every month. And that's how we
okay.
make sure that we're focusing on those metrics that really matter. Now, when we're doing projects, we'll use the business canvas similar to what we did today to say, okay, we want to do this project, we want to spend this much money, we want this type of return, and then we'll use that information to build like a scorecard to help us keep score on how well we're doing.
Interesting. And do you find that most of the people you work with keep like a collection of these documents over time, or where do these documents live as we fill them out? Do you recommend having just like a file of these things in your desk, or because I can see these being potentially even tools if you grow your business to a place it's ready to be sold to someone else. So what's the best way to kind of collect some of this more manual data that we're looking at today?
If you're old school like me, you, you have a binder, you print out the paper, and you use it that way. If you're a little bit new age, you might have a file on your computer. But one thing, and it's the funniest story. When I worked for 7-Eleven, there was a franchisee, and he had a Christmas binder, and I was like, "Dude, what is this?" And he's like, "Dorian, every other franchisee in the system runs out of eggnog at Christmas. I've never run out of eggnog at Christmas." It's like, how do you do that? Well, I print off the sales information for my key items every year after the holiday so I know how much I should order. And I always remember that because, the same thing happens every year. It was just St. Patrick's Day. Like, there's a certain amount of beer that you sold on St. Patrick's Day. If you can remember that, if you can remember all the activities that you did leading up to that, if it worked, then you do it again and do it better. If it didn't work, you start all over again. But I think having some type of system where you record this information, file it away, and then look at it again when you need it helps you to learn and grow.
That makes sense. I'm going to throw you one curveball that we didn't talk about in advance. I apologize. How does AI play into this? Are you finding that these are forms that you're going to use in conjunction with leveraging artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, or how can I use this with AI as I'm growing to learn more about AI available?
So, if I was a business owner and I was going through some of these items, there's a couple ways I potentially use AI. One way is with Gemini, it just has like a chat function where you can talk to it. And I've used that a couple times for brainstorming. I'll say something, it will say something back to me, and we iterate, and it just helps me kind of iterate my thoughts. The benefit of that is that it's another person asking you questions and getting you to think. The drawback is that, you know, AI isn't necessarily an expert in everything, so you don't get to necessarily leverage the expertise of someone like yourself that has worked with a whole lot of peoples in a region and has like expertise that can really guide you towards the right direction. But in lieu of being able to afford a professional, it's better than just talking to yourself.
I'll throw one more way that you could use it in there too is you could use the scorecard to also evaluate your competitors. You could have
Mm.
Chat GPT or AI do some of the work in and streamlining that so that you can see what other people are up to and then kind of compare notes or maybe even look for opportunities to evolve some of your thoughts. But that might be interesting to some of the people watching today or watching later, the idea of cross-referencing ideas or seeing what other companies are up to by asking ChatGPT or Gemini those questions.
Yeah, I love that because from a research standpoint, I feel like you can learn a lot by asking an AI tool to do the research for you. What I always encourage people to do, and I know that this is one of the best practices you share, is to ask for references so that you can actually cite the source and go visit it yourself, just to make sure there's no hallucinations going on.
Yeah.
But whenever you can save a little bit of time and get some really good information, you're putting yourself at a competitive advantage.
Love that. This has been such an awesome conversation. I'm big on numbers. I'm big on metrics because I think coming from a somewhat creative industry, there can be a lot of room for interpretation. So I'm a fan of measuring so we know where we are and we can see where we're going and how far we've come. So I have a lot of key takeaways from this conversation. Even having just answered some of the questions, it's very validating to know that taking notes of these things, it does something, it matters. It's not just an exercise for us, it's an activity that will serve our business and serve our relationships as a leader. So I've really enjoyed a lot of what we talked about. What are some of your key takeaways from today, Dorian?
You know, today is just a reinforcement that when you take the time to put things on paper, that new ideas are created. So as we are working through things,
I love
you
that.
threw out some things that weren't on my radar as far as what you could do to promote. A perfect example of that is being intentional as far as we're paying these employees anyway. Let's make sure that we have somebody with a camera that's capturing this so we can post it on social media and have some live video. It's huge because you're spending the money on the advertisement, on the host, and all those things already. The question that you have to ask yourself is, how do I get the best return on this time and this money? And going
Mhm.
through this process and ideating and really creating a situation where there's no bad ideas, I think can help you to maximize the return on your spend.
I think that's a really good lead into the idea of guiding decision making and empowering your team. Because one thing we didn't specifically talk about on this call, but would be relevant to me if I'm a brewery owner, is I may not be physically there every trivia night. So I need to know that the team not only understands my vision for trivia and my vision for the business, but understands how to take advantage of the opportunities and feels empowered to make decisions in the moment, even if I'm not there watching to see, or even if I don't have, the chief marketing officer there to say this is the marketing strategy. I think that's a really good lead into some of the things that we're going to talk about in the upcoming weeks as well. So I thank you for sharing that. That's a big one.
Yeah, I think it all starts with having that clarity of goal. When you can communicate to your employees, hey, this is the goal that we're going after, and these are the things that I'm empowering you to do to help us get there. It goes a long way to like helping them figure out what's important in guiding decision making. So I look forward to the opportunity to explore that in a little bit more detail and share some tips and best practices for really trying to create some momentum within your organization.
Awesome. This has been really fun so far. We've talked about some really cool things, and we have multiple other topics to talk about coming up in the next couple of weeks. Again, we film these live, and then they are available to be watched later on recording. And we've talked a little bit about maybe entertaining another guest host. So we've got some fun things we're still figuring out for you because, as Dorian mentioned earlier, this is live, and so live means not always perfect and subject to change. I don't see any specific questions in the chat right this second, but final thoughts about today, or what else would you like to share to lead us into the second half of this 6-part series?
Yeah, the first three parts have all been around how do you create a culture of teamwork. We started off by talking about you want to make sure you have a vision. Then we talked about the importance of building trust. And then once you have those two things, now you can start to set some goals. Once you have goals in place, it's time to kind of transition towards, how do we, motivate action and really get to driving the results that we're trying to. So the next three virtual workshops are all going to be around how do you protect momentum. We're going to spend some time
Mm.
talking about guiding decision making. We're going to spend some time talking about delegation. And then we'll wrap up with my favorite topic, one that I feel like not enough people talk about, which is navigating challenges. You know that there's going to be conflicts at work. If you have a plan for how you're going to deal with them, you're going to be able to get to the other side quicker, and you're going to be able to get to the other side actually advancing your business and making it stronger. So I look forward to sharing some tips, guidelines, and best practices with individuals around those topics.
Yeah, excellent. It's always very interesting talking to you. We have, I think, similar paths in some of the conversations we have with clients, but it's crazy how different our days can be and about what the different pain points look like based on what's happening in the world, based on what's happening in the business. So it's nice to talk to someone who's got these experiences. Your 7-Eleven experiences are just so interesting every time you share one of those stories. So it's also nice to see someone who's gone through the thick of it, right? Like you've experienced things at that volume and in so many different areas. And so to be able to take from all of those experiences and then curate this for small business owners and help people kind of connect the dots. It's wonderful that you have the bandwidth to share the information that you do.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you being a partner on this journey. And I feel like as much as I might be pouring into you, you're pouring into me. So it's definitely a win-win situation.
Excellent. Well, and that too, anyone watching this now or watching it later, collaborate. If somebody's got an idea to do something, try it. Nothing is going to be one perfect answer that solves all the problems. So knowing it's a moving target, here's also your permission to try something outside of your comfort zone or make time for conversations with people because you don't know what you're going to uncover. And connection has been such a huge component of the success of my business. And I'm so grateful for the connections that I have and again for these conversations. This has been a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks for joining us. If you want to learn more, please reach out to either myself or Madeline. We'd be glad to be a guide for you on your journey towards profit and love.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks.